thrilled on behalf of the Botanical Society, for whom it's a fundraiser, and of course from Renishaw Hills as well, who've agreed to open up so that we'd all have a look at the gardens. The first time is Amanda with us. Amanda? This is Amanda Mapagulu, and she and I laid our first garden for the show house on December the 16th, 2016. People moved in 2017, the first few people, and she's still here. She's a very proud product of the department. Yeah, so she's a really good, qualified horticulturist, and without her the gardens wouldn't have happened. So what we did in the early days, worked together. I do a drawing. I did proper drawings to start with. Now she gets a photograph with a quick sketch, and I give her a list of the plants. The nursery at Crockwell was set up for this project. Once the project got going, the nursery was closed down because they weren't set up to actually deal with the public. All the plants you see here, the majority are grown at that nursery. So Amanda and I started out, and I had to tell the MD at that stage, was Phil Barker, to plant one agapanthus would take us 20 minutes because we're planting the soils here are clay on top of shale. They're very unfriendly for plants that like the coast. The coast is, sandy, so a lot of the stuff we've got here is sandy stuff. So plants that like sandy soil. But anyway, we've adapted, and what you'll see is we've used, at this time of the year they look outstanding because all the aloes are in flower, but the next time we have an open garden, we'll do it in summer. These gardens look good at any time of the year, but of course they look even better when the aloes are in flower. But this place is unique in South Africa from what I understand, possibly everywhere, in that when you buy a place here, it comes with a garden. So when you move into a new house, you have a ready-made garden. We call it a beginner garden, but it's because you can add or subtract from it so long as it's indigenous. From the beginning, the place is 100% indigenous. If you want exotic plants, they need to be in a container. And so I think they were worried people wouldn't know what was indigenous, so that's why you get a garden with the house. But if anybody has moved into a new house with a new garden, you'll know it's a huge relief that somebody's done something for you. So, and of course, some people were here in 2019 when we had open gardens, and they'll see the difference. For Amanda and I, we can visualize what these little plants are going to look like, but a small plant will grow, generally within the year, except for the trees which are slower growing. So I'm going to take you on quite a short walk today to show you Renishaw. And then with Renishaw, when it's been the Crooks Brothers head office for a very long time, and it used to have coral trees, erythrinas, which was a sort of an old-fashioned plant. My parents' generation all planted them. They came all the way up the road from the main road, and we tried to keep them, but when they made the new road, we lost most of them. So Doug Cook, the nursery, I asked him to grow me 600 new ones so we could put an avenue back, and I wanted to use them as a sort of theme because they've gone out of favour, and yet they're such a wonderful plant when they're in flower in winter, and it brings all the sun for the birds. So he did, but what he didn't realise is he mixed up amongst them some of the Erythrina caffra, which is what I call the giant. It grows 3 times the size. So you'll see we have got the avenue planted. It's quite young, it's only been in for 2 years. And here we've sometimes had to take out the very big ones because they can be a problem with roads. But otherwise we use very few trees because people want the view. And the houses are reasonably small. So for anybody, wherever you live, more than 3 trees in your garden and you won't have flower beds because there won't be any sun. So we all love our trees, but the more trees you have, the few flowers you're going to have, fewer flowers. So we're going to take a walk. We'll go along the bottom here, and then I'll stop. Plants have been labelled, but we won't worry about the labels. I'll take you to the ones that I think are of particular interest as people interested in gardening. They are relatively new, and they have some plants that we don't use elsewhere. You're not going to see inside people's private gardens. You're going to see what's on the roadside. So here the simplest human, which is with pink flowers. There's a pretty one over there. And behind it is that large greyish leaf, something called the Pondo helichrysum, or the Pondo everlasting. It's a really fantastic, relatively new plant available if you know to ask for it. And I'd recommend it in every garden, but they're bigger ones in the garden back there. Label those. When you come back, if you've got the time and you're interested in other plants, you'll see a bit more variety here. There's a big variety. If anybody wants it, I actually made a list. There are 140 plants I wanted to label for the walk. I suppose there's 400 species we use here generally, but the list of 140 I typed up, I made 20 of them, left them in my office. So if you leave your email address with the book table, I will email that to you. It will give you an idea of the variety that's here. This bed you're looking at behind you, it's the first bed that I did here when it was still Crooks Brothers head office. I was asked to do this flower bed. I'd already done the Crockwell garden, 100% indigenous. They asked me to do this to prepare the staff for the fact that they were going to have indigenous gardens. At that stage it was a bed of cannas.
Oh my word.
But it was a huge bed. There were not more than 90 cannas. So it was a huge, well-tended, well-weeded black flower bed with a few cannas sticking out of it. And so I didn't have time at that stage to do much. I was about to go overseas. I did a very basic plan, which was a row of Carissa green carpet, and then a row of agapanthus, and then dietes, sort of rows and rows. In fact, one of the farm managers came past and said, "Oh, it's wonderful, you're giving us a sort of farmer's version of a garden." But you can see how it's grown. This has been here since 2009. The one thing I did want to point out is it's not quite working. You'll see at the back, you'll see, those who know, the Cape honeysuckle. We've got the yellow and the orange, but they were always intended, and I do have a photograph that you can get out for now. It's meant to be kept no higher than knee height. So you keep cutting it, every time it's finished flowering you cut it. It stays in flower almost throughout the year. So you've got colour without having to plant any other perennial. You get the colour from the Techumeria. We haven't quite got that level of maintenance management going yet, but it's coming. And then you'll see we've used this on the banks. A lot of what we do here is planting the banks to manage stormwater, so we don't get erosion. And so we use the deep rooting or the big rooting plants, which are the aloes, which also deflect water, the agapanthus, the dietes, the aristida. It's very difficult to get grasses. South African grasses, we have over 900 species, but you're more likely to buy grasses from around the world than you are to buy South African ones. This is aristida junkiformis, which we call gorgoni grass. Farmers hate it because it's not palatable, but it's fantastic for gardeners. It's very neat. Keeps that. These have been here since 2009. We just cut them back. I don't cut them back every year. We only cut them back when they flop over. When they get so heavy they lie down, then we cut them, and not before. Because to me, at the back where they have been cut back, you see it's a very fine, pretty, like a green pincushion. But it's lovely. This is old flower heads, and I love it when it's this creamy colour in winter. So we don't cut it back every year. It's about every 2 to 3 years. And you'll see one red of poker at the back. We've used the pokers a lot, and the common garden poker, which flowers in midwinter, is what we use here, and nobody's really sure where it originated. We also use the winter poker. I'll show you some later. They have a grey leaf, winter flowering. This also flowers in winter, but we found the leaves get very scruffy, they get bent, and they just go brown in summer. So we cut them back, and if you cut them back in summer, they often flower in midsummer as well. So I highly recommend it. If you have them in the garden, manage them and you'll get 2 lots of flowering. We're going to walk now across towards the avenue of tree aloes. are underplanted with wild olives. I want to show you why you don't use wild olives at the coast. So eventually all of this area will be built up. It's difficult to imagine, but it is all the buildings around big sort of piazzas. It's a nice concept, but as you all know, these things happen slowly. So at this stage, that stays like that, and we have at least, I think it's at least three grey daikon that live there permanently. What I want to say here is these are wild olives. Some of you are familiar with wild olives, especially if you live inland. They look much grayer, and they have beautiful gnarled stems. They don't like the coast. It's too humid. I was told not to use them, but I decided I would prove them wrong, because I thought it can take the wind, it can take the sun. Why not? It can take clay. Well, these have been in at least 10 years.
Good grief.
And they really aren't an advertisement. Look, I like having them. I think the mixture worked. That part itself, but I don't recommend it. We don't use them within the estate. And the aloes, tree aloes, you've got to be terribly careful. They get enormous. So don't put them too close to a road, too close to a bank, too close to foundations. They look beautiful in a container when you've just got one of them, but it's going to crack that container quite quickly. So you've got to think about how you use it. With the euphorbia, you'll see some over there and you'll see it elsewhere. In order to, we need the euphorbia, it grows quickly, but ultimately we want the speckworm to take over. The speckworm is slower, but the speckworm is lovely. And it always nice fresh green. It doesn't flower here. The karoo flowers beautifully. It looks like lilac heather. But up here, if you get a flower at all, it's a pale pink. You don't grow it for the flower here. But this is a tree that some of you might not be familiar with. It's something called Vernonia colorata. All the names I'm giving you are the names that occur in my books. That means they're out of date. If you want the new up-to-date name, if you go onto the internet and you put in Vernonia colorata, you should get to the new name. But I've got a garden book coming out. It only comes out next year, even next year. That'll have the new names, but I always put the old names because most of us have learned the old names. And as gardeners, I don't expect, it's not a field guide, it's a gardener's book. But this is fantastic for butterflies. So it's now, this is in seed. It gets a lilac-y, a pale whitish lilac plant, a flower. It's a small rounded shrub or small tree. If it's got a huge tree, like I knew it in Gamers, it would climb up through a fig tree. But otherwise, it's a very manageable one, especially for an estate like this. So we prune them to keep the sun. Then around the edge, the grey, that's a grey gazania. And this one, we love the grey, but it always dies off after a year, 18 months. Different colours, the yellow and the orange. And at the back, the candelabrum, the ones with these spikes sticking up, that is aloe candelabrum, which comes in different colours. You can see right at the back there's one with white in it. It can be orange, it can be pink. It's got a very restricted distribution. It's definitely a Natal aloe. It's between, I keep forgetting, Camperdown, that area, down to the coast. It's the natural one here. A little bit further south and we get ferox. I know ferox looks the same, but it's got a very spiny leaf. It goes all the way to Cape Town. Just as a matter of interest, what we're looking at here, this is parking for what are going to be visitors to the apartments that are going to be built up there. The people who live here, we needed to give them privacy for what was going to be built behind them. So in that bit of land, they have courtyards at the back. We filled it up. First of all, we made a shrubbery, which can be trimmed along the front, which we can trim a bit more and make it look neater and prettier. But behind it, we've used all sorts of flowering shrubs and fruiting plants to try and encourage different types of birds. Because these are nectar loving, we get the seed loving, but we want the fruit eating. So that's a huge mixture. And we manage it so nothing gets too big. Because they also, if they're in their courtyards, they don't want anything that's going to shade them out. But the combination means they keep their privacy, and they also only really got into cultivation in the last 9 years ago or so. It's one of the Ponderland endemics. We have a whole bunch of plants that we're now getting through a grower down the south coast at the Flora at Munster. So for me, this is the most amazing plant. It flowers for about 2 months. You can see the bees are loving it. And if we didn't have rain, and we've just had a whole lot of rain, the leaves go a lovely reddish colour. And we put it along the bottom to catch any sand, so we don't want sand on the road. So we have something at the base of each one. And behind it is you'll be much more familiar with the fairy cressula. That one. The fairy cressula, some people treat as weedy because it makes lots of babies. But it's a fantastic, because it stays in flower for up to 3 months. So don't write it off. Use it, and when you've got too much, share it with a friend. And then this is the jade plant, or the pink joy. South Africans call it the pink joy. Do you know that it's the most popular indoor plant in the world? In this book I've been writing and researching everything, I wanted to get common names around the world. It is grown in almost every country in the world because it will grow from a little cutting. A little piece in a tiny pot looks beautiful, and you can get plants at Ndumo Game Reserve, where I lived for 10 years. It grows up to about 3-4 meters with a stem this size in the wild. I don't know if you've ever seen that in the garden, but it probably is in old gardens. So it will grow in the shade and where it won't flower, but in the sun it will flower.
And so in the house it won't flower?
It won't flower.
It'll just be a nice feature.
And I've got it all over the place in my garden, even though there is sun, it's never flowered.
Oh, yes, that's what's...
But you know what, at the Cavern Hotel, which is in the Drakensberg, it's definitely not where it should be. It flowers then beautifully in pots in the sun. So give it the sun, and maybe one day it will flower. This little yellow bush is Gonidia. Spelled with a G like Gnu. Gonidia took me nervous. Di Livingston Keith, who was on the earlier walk, she bought it at a BOTSOC plant fair. And the chap who grows it, I bought it from him, I gave it, my man did too. These have been in about 3 years, could even be 4. They don't get bigger than that. They never stop flowering and they just look amazing. So if ever you see it, take it. It's got a, don't worry about the common name, learn it. I think I said to you all, if you want a list of what's here, you leave your email address and I'll send it to you. It's not really a calcarata. If you can imagine it without flowers, it's quite pretty. It looks a bit like the other balbine, but it has these nice bright green leaves, but it's stayed in flower almost all year round. So again, it's not an outstandingly beautiful plant, but it's a really pretty plant. And it's a bulb, so it makes plenty of babies. Here, not everybody enjoys the river indigo because they say it seeds itself too much. But you know what? It's very easy to weed out the babies, and it's a very rewarding one if you keep it. This was cut back and it's already shooting, but we would like to be a tree. I've got one of mine at home are about 4 meters tall, but they can do that. Cut some back, pollarded them into making, a closer one. And at the clinic, they've actually kept cutting them, and I've used them, not me, some of the residents at Mdoni Retirement Village, have used them as a hedge. By cutting them and making them spread from below, they've made beautiful hedges. And you'll see an even better one just round the corner. And then in front of it, if you're up at the community centre, you walk around and look at the gardens, you'll see we've labelled this lily. It's Albuca battaniana, which is the Pondo albuca. There is a garden plant that looks similar. It's also South African, but it has a erect stem and a single plant. This, if you look, makes a whole bunch of bulbs, which means that one bulb that you plant will eventually give you anything up to 10 flowers, flowering heads. It's a fantastic plant. It has a flush of flowering in about October, November, and then another flush in the sort of winter period. So it's highly recommended.
So in full sunlight?
Full sun. Mine over there.
It's like a coral.
It does, doesn't it?
Like a
I think it's amazing. And it's another one. We don't have lots of plants that are completely outside of our area. They're all from South Africa. But this is from outside our area and it managed to do well. But when it gets too big, if it was in the wild, it would probably collapse. But if in your garden, just cut it back. You could cut it right back. With you, how far did you cut it back? Right back, yeah. Cut it right back. And this is a year's growth after being cut right back. Here's Deming's labrum, which is the cat's whiskers, or the tinderwood. It gets bunches of small white flowers, which attract butterflies, and then it gets fruit. The birds love the fruit. It can be single stemmed, they're quite a neat little tree, or else this one's been pruned from the start, made a bush. So we've used it here, it's the right size. We can't afford to use anything that's too big. And it's done well in the clay. Using trophy, they call it the fast bugweed, with this little pink flower. It's really pretty. Left unattended, it will take over the entire world. It's not a weed, but it grows very happily. So it's where you have a bank where nobody's going and you don't want to have to deal with it more than once a year, we put it in. Here it's easy for us. This was cut back and look, it's very pretty. And then this time of the year, it's getting the butterflies that need it. And lots of others, looks like wasps there, or bees. Bees. You see, we try to provide privacy between the different years using taller plants, and we do prune them as much as the resident will allow. And here's the grui and the wild raisin with the pink flowers, which we bring them whenever we can because it's so good for the birds. And then we've got the Amata Guru, the Namdam, the Carissa. That's the big one up there. And this is the This is Bispinosa, which gets bunches of small flowers and has a small red fruit. We use this because we don't want people to enter here, so we're trying to keep people away. Down below, the pink geranium you see, geraniums are actually pelargoniums. That is an indigenous pelargonium, it's Pelargonium inquinans, which I think it's Eastern Cape rather than here.
It's a beautiful one. I must actually take some more slips of it.
Yeah. Well, look at that. There's a really lovely, the shell bush looking amazing down there.
That's looking gorgeous.
And the Cape honeysuckle, I thought it's quite interesting to see if anybody's dealing with fences, how it will climb a fence very successfully. So these areas, what you're looking at here, is a gap between the houses every now and again, where they're allowed for stormwater and so on. And that's given us, so we have a path, we're not following it today, but the path comes down there, through the next one, and then down into a patch of forest. It allows us to use some different plants. This is a local Crassula rogersi, which can have a pink or a yellow or an orange flower, and you can actually, if you use it as a ground cover, you can walk on it. You can see we've used it quite a lot here. And then the little one with the blue-green leaf, that is Ruskia. It's more manageable. I use it every garden should have wild duck as much as you can manage, but do remember it gets tall. So you get two species. You get the klipducker, which flowers in February, March, with a broader leaf and a flower not quite as beautiful colour. And it's over by the time this one flowers. This is Leonotis leonoris. But what we found when we work on the beachfront, when they finished flowering, cut a third off and they will flower again in October, November. Then cut them right down, 30 centimetres. Get them right down. And I'm going to start, because mine get so tall and they get blown over, I'm going to start cutting about a third off in January and see whether it would give me a nice compact plant.
Tell me, in your book, would you tell us hints like this?
Yes,
Cut it to a third.
I think we have. I think it is. We've tried to make the text work for gardeners. It's not a field guide; it's a garden book. The trouble is we've only got about places where we don't want to have to use a balustrade. Very thorny. It's actually from the low felt. You can see the yellow flower.
Yes.
If it's in a situation where it's not so dry, or if it's flowering in late summer, the yellow flower really shows up against the green leaves. But I used to love it, but now we've used it in this situation, and now it's worrying me because it's so prickly. But that's why we've used it, to stop people taking shortcuts over the edge. It's very steep. It's just amazing to see how beautifully these dioecious they are doing so well, and the yellow one doesn't normally look so good in winter. It's that winter rain. We always get winter rain. The Euriops, this one we planted at the top where it was neglected and it looks like bonsai now, but it has this greyish leaf and yellow flower and it looked beautiful for years and years and years. It's fantastic. That we actually have to buy in. We buy seedlings, the nursery. What we've used, which is local and grows wild, and I used to dismiss as weedy, and I absolutely love it. I've got it lining my drive and I'm quite shady. It's this tall and it has yellow flowers all year. And that we're using a lot here now, but because it grows so tall, it can get from shoulder height. That we put at the back. We just put it in the right place. Whereas this won't get bigger than that.
That one's got the bright green.
Yes.
Yes. And it cuts back quite well.
Yes.
Yes. And it's
Which is done particularly well here, because we had this very difficult bank. We couldn't figure out what to put here. In frustration, we put it here, but actually it's done a wonderful job.
Beautiful.
Really lovely job. And it secured the bank. The nice thing about it, if you're trying to secure a bank, is that the water never gets to the soil. It actually literally goes over the top. And the agricultural drains down at the bottom, so they deal with the water. So this is the same, it's the same crassula we saw, which is the white, pink and yellow flower. It is very interesting. It's a wonderful small tree. And it's absolutely gorgeous when it's in flower. Every time you cut it back, it will flower again. I planted one in front of the viewing point of one of the crocodile farms my husband was working at. And he said, but you've blocked the view of the ponds. So whenever it got above waist height, we cut it back and it stayed in flower almost all year. So anybody who's got it, when it's finished flowering, cut off the seed pods, produces masses. And and you'll keep it in flower.
Now, where would you cut it if you want to cut at the bottom? You can't cut it at the bottom.
No, you cut above a fork,
Oh,
and you would choose where to cut it. You want
so
to
you
keep
can
that.
go the.
I would cut the edges off to try. This one, it's not ready for lots of cutting now.
Mm.
You want to get the right shape first. Once it's got the right shape, then you can keep cutting. So
So you
here
cut
I
above
would
a
trim
fork.
the edges off to get around the crown, depending on the shape you want.
So that's is it Igna Farrell's name? Same as.
No, it's also the pea family, but it's Calpurnia. Different thing altogether.
California being the first.
Yes, Calpurnia aurea. It's really lovely. We planted a lot here. A lot of them did really well. At Widdenham, they really battled. Widdenham's also got clay and shale. And we've even stopped using them here because some work beautifully and others don't. But we need to keep at it because every time I see it in flower. And do not plant a cycad anywhere near a road. Because a cycad with the leaves cut off is a deformed cycad, and that's a deformed. So this is going to be removed. You just haven't had time. And if you look up here, we've used the bush violet, which covers. It's very good for covering banks, but it will also ultimately cover the scabies. This one is a hybrid. It's a well-known hybrid between two species. And it means that at the moment it's in full flower, but it'll have a few flowers throughout the year. They call it Valeria Purple Prince or Pink Baby. It's got different names to tell you what the hybrid. Valeria obtusa is the indigenous one which we use in indigenous situations, but in the village here I'm happy to use this. You can't let it get anywhere near the road. People don't like us pruning it. And I'm not mad on neat shrubs, but neat hedges. But there are situations where a neat hedge is called for. We did this so we didn't have to have a balustrade. We think this is much prettier than a balustrade. And it's doing beautifully. If you look straight ahead, and then it gets a winged pod. But that isn't what you grow it because it's this lovely fresh green. It looks like this all year round. It looks like it's a new leaf. If you prune it correctly, to prune correctly a hedge, you've got to prune smaller at the top. The base must get sun. If it doesn't get sun, it'll get such a pretty tree. Normally they stay between 8 and 16 years before they flower. This one has been, in 5 years, it's been flowering for 2 years. So we're very excited. We obviously found exactly the right spot. It's the most beautiful tree for those who don't know. And then also just looking here, if you look at the very steep banks, we don't have problems with soil coming down the banks. We've entirely held our banks without having to do anything else. If you're standing here, that's a better looking toad tree. That's a forest toad. Forest toad is a lovely fragrant white flower.
It seems like crazy.
Oh, only. Somebody's telling me it seeds like crazy. Try growing it here. What is the common name you say?
False olive.
False olive. It can make, at the Ambers, up in Harwich, the retirement villages there, they've used it as a street tree, as an avenue tree. It makes a big rounded crown tree, and this has been kept this size. I don't know if it'll ever make the big round, but it's perfect for here. We don't want anything too big. It's a tough tree. It can take frost, it can take drought, it can take just about anything. It doesn't get amazingly beautiful flowers, but the insects are still drawn to the flowers.
This one you get?
That's the Caradendron, the cat's whiskers, or tinderwood. Yeah. I'm very fond of that false olive. I think it's a lovely thing. This is an attenuation pond. All the stormwater above is brought in here and held, and then when it overflows, it goes into another one. We thought we could have a water garden there, but it doesn't actually hold water. So it's got a screening crown. This is the only croton we've got, the only croton vertissimus, which is a lavender croton. People love the tree. I just can't find growers who are growing it. But it's a very attractive, flowers are small, so you don't buy it for the flowers. But it always has the odd orange leaf on it, and it's just a very neat meat crown shade tree. We have a beautiful shrub that never gets as big as that, but this tree is very lovely. See, these river indigos were planted in 2017. They haven't made 1 million babies. They just sit here looking pretty. So so many people have told me, no, we won't use them because they're weedy. It's only weedy if you let it be. Aloes. They wanted something, we actually had a very nice Euryops as well. Ultimately the Euryops died out, the grasses have been overwhelmed. But these aloes, there are two. There's the yellow one, there's aloe tenuifolia, is that right? Here's my cruchy. Thank you. And aloe ciliaris, thank you. Now when I'm tired of talking, the brain doesn't function. But they are, thank you Amanda, method of my madness asking you to come. But they have flowered, they have never stopped flowering since we planted them. They've just got fuller. So Amanda takes from here to plant elsewhere. They're incredibly pleasing. If you put that against a wall or a fence, both of them, they'll go up and over. But where they don't have one, they just make a wonderful flower. And that's the Cressida ovata, the pink joy. Good flower. That's Plectranthus madagascariensis, which grows in the shade and in the sun. On the inside, this is the Trichotatus, the witch hazel. Trimmed in the hedge. So in order to give this masonette some garden, we've given them, because this is a public footpath where any of the residents can walk. It carries on to there. So we've planted that to give her that kind of space. Using this, because it uses up less space, but we've managed to get it wide. But I wanted you to really look, you're all going too fast. On your way back, have a look at the witch hazel hedge on the right. Yeah. So that's when I showed you growing tall. That's how it looks if you trim it. Okay. Makes a very lovely, and it's pretty. Quick growing. Is that quick growth?